welcome to Back in the Day, Bermuda Memories. We're going back to January 1982, when Sir John Swans was elected as Premier. Welcome, Sir John. Nice to meet you, sir. Yes. The first question I wanted to ask you, what was your memories of the day when you were elected as Premier? What was going through your mind?
Well, having been elected
Yes.
and having gone to Government House to be sworn in, I was on my way back from Government House,
Right.
thinking about, as I left Government House, thinking about what was the first thing I was going to do.
Right.
And the first thing I did, I went to Pembroke Church, just
Right.
below the hill from Government House.
Right.
I went in the church and prayed.
Right.
And one of the prayers I always have used, which is a serenity prayer,
Okay.
because you ask God to help you do the things you can do,
Okay.
help you to understand the things you can't do,
Right.
and give you the courage to do the things you should do.
Right. Okay.
I think that's the basis in which I have operated my life, in terms of knowing you can't do everything,
Right.
but you concentrate on the things that you know you can do,
Right.
but you don't put down the things that you either don't understand or you just don't have the wherewithal to get it done at the time.
Right. Of course.
So prayer was very, very important.
Yes.
And the next thing that was important was to go to the Cabinet Office and try to just sort out what I was going to do for the next week,
Okay.
in terms of I had to form a new cabinet.
Right.
I had to begin to look at, this is January, it was early time for getting ready to start the appointment of boards.
Right.
So there were a lot of things that were in place that had to be carried out,
Of course.
and there were a lot of things that had to be restructured.
Right.
And that was my job to get that done. And so it was a challenging period coming out of Home Affairs into the premiership, and it happened so fast.
Okay.
By November that year, the 9th, I was a third. I had three votes. My vote, Jack Sharp, and Hector Davis.
Wow.
By the 15th of December, 15th of January, I had enough votes
Okay.
to make me premier.
Okay.
And that's how the whole thing got started.
Okay.
So it was short, sweet, and the results were obviously satisfying.
Okay.
But I wanted to do what was good for Bermuda rather than do what was good for myself or the whims of others. That was a tough job, and you had people always trying to push you one way and you need to go another way.
Of course. Of course. I mean, I can imagine, handed such responsibility, it could be daunting. It could be a bit overwhelming getting your feet wet. Just trying to basically find your rhythm.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I've been a soccer fan for decades now, and I read how, players go into coaching and management, and they say, the job is an enormous job.
Uh-huh.
They don't have, when you're a player or just a cabinet minister, you just have to think of yourself in a sense. But when you're a leader, you have to think of the whole,
Well, yeah, you have to think of the whole organic side of a community.
Yes.
And how it functions, what it's made up of,
Right.
what was going to produce the desired results,
Okay.
and who's going to play a part in producing that.
Okay.
And what role do you play as the orchestrator of the whole process to ensure that that process then, that objective then is fulfilled?
Okay. All right. What was actually the first thing you did as Premier?
The first thing
You actually did. What was the first in terms of like policies? What was your first?
Oh, my first policies. Oh, well, we had to get ready early for the budget,
Right.
because budget's in February.
Oh.
So we had to take and start looking at that. The one thing that we did look at, I think, when I became premier, the Pembroke Marsh was burning.
Right.
Fires in the Pembroke Marsh. People were living in tents. People were living in the marsh itself. People were living in tunnels. And coming from a very humble background myself,
Right.
I had a sympathy for what these people were going through.
Yes.
Deep sympathy in my heart.
Right.
And I said, we've got to find a way of stopping this.
Right.
So one of the things I did, and particularly fortunate for me, is I came up with a building background. For 10 years, I built 40% of the homes on the island,
Wow.
from 65 to 75.
Okay.
So it was not new to think of those terms. And so the first thing we did is, people I went to see was the Salvation Army.
Okay.
And I said to them, look, I need your help. If we put a building up on Parsons Road, would you oversee it?
Right.
That property exists today.
Okay.
The main habitat for people who live out and can go back and have somewhere to sleep. And
Right.
so they have extended that to feeding people and everything else.
Okay.
That was one of the first things I did, was to do that and to stop the fires in the Pembroke Marsh.
Okay.
So there were social issues that need to be dealt with. We
Okay.
tended to sort of lean on the economic side, and I
Right.
felt as though that we really should get on with some of the social issues
Yes.
that we needed to do, and that was one of the first things. And then we renovated schools. The prison was a very undesirable casemates,
Right.
so we proceeded to build the present Westgate
Right.
facility. The bus depot was run down. We built that,
Okay.
and when we got rid of the dump, we needed to take and find an alternative. So we built the incinerator plant in North Shore
Okay.
itself. And it goes on. We were doing so well, and many things. We bought Global House from one of the local people for government buildings.
Okay.
So civil servants would have somewhere decent to be.
Right.
They had the government administration building, but it wasn't sufficient to house the civil servants.
Okay.
So there were many things that we did on a humanitarian line.
Yes.
And also I had to look at and say, how are we going to take and pay for all this type of thing, what we're going to do. And the other thing we looked at was Barbados had a tax treaty, and ACE and XL were formed in Barbados. And I knew that if we didn't do something, we would not have the type of revenue we need to have. So we set out to try to get a tax treaty for Bermuda.
Okay.
And that was a long, drawn-out, protracted process, but it served us well. And when, in the meantime, the revenues were coming in.
Right.
We picked up the revenues because we just come out of a strike in 1981,
That's right. Yes.
which shut the country down, and really was a sort of, if you want to ask me what was the really final demise of our tourist business as we knew it, that was the defining point right there in a nutshell.
Okay.
When we had tourists walking to the airport across the causeway with their suitcases, and the private sector having to take people across, it was bad for tourism. We didn't have the international business we have today.
Right.
We tend to sort of forget that, we've come a long way,
Yes.
and yet we have a long way to go. And I was fortunate that the business really did well.
Yes.
And by the time I left office, we had about $125 million in debt, and yet we completed some 22 construction projects
Yes.
and about 24 programs that improved the facilitation of the public use of services and things that they needed for their development.
Okay.
So we had an excellent process by which we dealt with domestic issues, international issues,
Right.
and redefined Bermuda as an international center, and I hope as a humanitarian place. Now,
Yes.
we were so successful, people thought that we should cut back on it, and when they did cut back, because the British government came to me about these work permits, about 6-year term limits, I said to them, if not people guess, I said, look, we'll deal with that when it comes. I'm not going to put it in. So I resisted it. Unfortunately, it got in
Okay.
at a later date, and that together with changing conditions and with and we saw the really decline of the international business as we knew it then.
Right.
Where most of the head people left Bermuda to go live in Switzerland or in Ireland or New York. But we can turn the clock again. We can turn the clock forward again by what we do
Right.
when we act on behalf of the people of Bermuda.
Yes.
We have a government, we have a new premier, we have a new government, and my hope is, and that I see them trying to get this process going with the FinTech industry.
Yes.
It's almost ununderstood as it was when I was trying to get the treaty going. I was under heavy criticism by members of the public and some of the business people who said I should not interfere with Bermuda's affairs. But I said, look, I've got a job as a premier to get a job done.
Absolutely.
So the same thing now we see that the FinTech. Cryptocurrency might be a bit of a big reach. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how we structure conditions and processes that make efficient use of whatever we do, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education,
Right.
whether it's providing transportation services. Our transportation services right now, as you see, somebody just punched one of the people who was guiding the system.
Yes.
It is an ad hoc process that needs to be brought under some type of effective management and accountability.
Yes.
It is a public service
Yes.
that we offer people when they come to Bermuda. They don't want to hear about our domestic issues and
No.
they want to have the service that they can, which they're used to getting elsewhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Bermuda's famed for hospitality and friendliness.
We are friendly people. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's not every now and then somebody gets their back up, but generally speaking, we are very friendly people.
Yes.
In fact,
Yeah.
tourists come here and international people come here. In fact, sometimes they feel uncomfortable in elevators when you get on an elevator and you say good morning or good afternoon. If they first arrive from New York or particularly
Yeah.
from London,
Yes.
they look at you and say, well, what did you say that for?
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
so, but you know, we've got to keep these traditions up and help our young people to understand them.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that we are diminishing ourselves. It means the fact that we embrace people as people.
We do, and we need to keep that because, you know, Bermuda's got a worldwide reputation, and we need to keep that.
Well, when you lose it, you know, you pay the price.
Yes,
And it's easy to lose something, but
very,
it's very hard to gain it back.
absolutely.
And, just like now, you know, we'd like to get some of this international business back to Bermuda because the tourist business doesn't bring us the bang for the buck. It doesn't bring the income that we like to have. So we need to get some more international business in Bermuda. So we're trying to get back some form of international business that was here but it's gone.
Right,
So be careful what you give up because if it's serving your purpose, because when you think you can do without it,
right,
then you find out, oh, it's not. It's worse than I thought it was.
right. Do you think it would help if, for example, you know, we lowered the cost of a vacation to Bermuda?
Well, you know, you can say that, but I mean, how do you do that? You can't blame the Bermudian. The Bermudian, a Bermudian works, she gets paid a certain amount of salary.
Right,
They go out and they have to buy transportation, they have to buy food, they have to pay for rent, or they have to pay a mortgage. They try to educate their children.
right,
All these things, and then when you build a house in Bermuda, it's not like building a house in the United States.
right.
Bermuda houses are very expensive to build and to maintain.
Absolutely,
You
absolutely.
know, and so I'm not sure if you can lower costs that much. But you know, you should never, people understand Bermuda. There's people coming here, that people might moan about the cost, but generally speaking, yeah, but for what you get, look Bermuda, landscape. You could never find another country that has better landscaping than Bermuda.
Right,
You could never find a country that has pastel houses and white
absolutely,
roofs as we have.
absolutely.
You look at our streets. We used to complain they're dirty. Now that they've cleaned them up, nobody says, hey, remember when we had all sorts of paper and bottles and everything along the streets? It's been cleaned up.
Yeah, just
So-
like it used to be back then.
So, you know, we've made progress, but the problem is they bitch and moan when something is wrong, but they should give praise when something is
He was
right.
right, absolutely.
And we've come a long way, and I mean, even in Hamilton, I've never seen so many buildings being fixed up. When we say we've got 600,000 square feet of empty office space, but look what we have. We have every building you look at in Hamilton is being fixed up or has been fixed up. It looks nice on the outside,
Yeah.
might not look nice on the inside.
Right,
So is the cost of Bermuda expensive? The answer is yes. But do you get quality when you come to Bermuda? You go to the beaches in Bermuda. The beaches are clean.
yes, gold, pink sand,
The facilities at the beaches are good.
yes,
You know, you go to some of these other places, you can't even find facilities in many cases.
right,
So I don't, you know, we've got to stop beating up on ourselves so much.
right,
And if we feel good about ourselves and help to improve what we have and what we offer to other people, you know, when we say we're polite people, politeness doesn't just stop at saying hello. It really says, I'm going to do things to help you to feel good.
Right,
And that's
absolutely.
what politeness should
absolutely.
be about. And that
Yes.
means all amenities that you offer and or whether it's a clean taxi or clean bus, or whether it's a cycle that's been properly repaired, so that everything is first class. And people don't mind paying for something that they think they're getting money's worth. Every destination in the world is not cheap. You go to New York, it's not cheap.
No.
You go to London, it's not cheap.
Right.
You know, it's rather expensive. If you go to, what we're trying to do is compare ourselves to islands to the south.
Right.
They have a different set of conditions that they live under, and a different structure, and a different history.
Right.
And we don't see Bermudans rushing down south for jobs. We see people down south rushing up to Bermuda for jobs.
Yes.
So there must be something here that makes them want to come here.
Yeah, I agree.
So I would say that we're on the right track. We want to sort of make sure that government stays on the right track.
Yes.
The government's pre-budget just been put out. I encourage the public to read it, to give feedback. We start the dialogue.
Right.
We start the dialogue of not just sitting back and moaning. You know, there are two types of people, I say, in Bermuda. There are those who celebrate life, and those who commiserate life.
Yes.
If we stop commiserating and find a way to celebrate together by really looking at what things are and trying to share ideas with each other, we'll make progress.
Absolutely. The last question I wanted to ask you, what do you think was your greatest achievement as Premier?
What was my greatest achievement as Premier?
Yes. And that you're most proud of?
Well, the funniest thing is, I've been working in the field of business for a long time. And you do something and you move on.
Right.
You know, building houses, building office buildings, setting up a savings and loan company.
Right.
You make the most of what it is. So what would be my proudest achievement, I think, was I thought that I was able to improve a lot of Bermudians in scholarships because the economy picked up, in conditions because we renovated schools, in housing because we put up a lot of housing while I was Premier, so that young people would have somewhere to stay other than sleeping in the bedroom with their parents or sleeping in the living room where the television was still going. I mean, if you had seen conditions back those days, and see them today, you couldn't believe Bermuda would ever have been in that state of affairs. So the social side of my responsibility was quite extensive.
Yes.
The economic side, obviously, the treaty which we consummated with the United States, stopping ships from going on the shores of Bermuda, which I did when I was Minister of Marine and Ports, by saying we need a no-go zones. You don't see ships anywhere near Bermuda anymore because I negotiated that with the International Maritime Organization.
Right.
You know, we're still at the edge of opportunity. We're still we've got an infrastructure.
Right.
We criticize our education system, but keep in mind, 50% of our kids are in private schools, and 50% are in public schools. 50% in private schools, they seem to do well, and at least 50% of people in public schools seem to do quite well.
Okay.
Yet we tend to beat up, and all we look at is the statistics out of the public sector.
Yes.
But we tend to beat up, but if we put everything together, we'd find out that statistic would be quite different.
Yes.
So we tend to sort of unfairly treat ourselves, and then we beat up on ourselves, and then we wonder why our kids have a negative attitude because we ourselves are injecting into ourselves, or by others, adults, this negative thing about Bermuda.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying the education system doesn't need reforming. It needs to be brought up to current contemporary times, since we're now moving into an electronic world in which things are moving much faster, and kids got to be more orientated towards that.
Right.
And we can teach kids more on an individual basis as opposed to a collective basis, because we can use technology to do that with.
Right.
Sure, we can make steps forward, but to sit around and just simply say, oh, it's failed, it is a disaster, it's not working, you know, anybody will know the fact that there's always a percentage, and you can't blame some of these kids, and you can't blame the parents, because they came out of adverse conditions, what we talked about earlier,
Okay.
and living around Pembroke Marsh, or living in subjective houses. They still had children, and they brought their children up in those conditions. That's why those conditions had to be improved, and there has been an improvement in performance.
Yes.
Bermuda's the only place I know of that with 50,000 nationals participating in world events, whether they are the arts, or whether they are in sports, or whether
Yes.
they're in academics. No, we push way beyond our capacity in terms of numbers, and yet we still are not satisfied.
Yeah.
And this is good. Being not satisfied is good, but don't let that not satisfied be infused into young people's minds and saying that you're failures all the time.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
You asked me why I think this way. I was brought up. They kicked me out of elementary school when I was 14, told me because I couldn't read, I had bad eyesight, and I later found out I was dyslexic.
Right.
But I never heard from my parents about my being a failure. And they worked with me until they were able to see me set a course for myself. And once I got the wind of my sails, and I knew how to steer my ship,
Yes.
I could carry the load I need to carry, I could go into the wind I needed to get into, and the ship picked up speed as I did.
Okay.
And so I would say to parents, and to administrators, and to leaders, if we all work together as one, if we all sort of be tolerant of each other, and knowing that there will be differences, but
Right.
respectfully,
Yes.
I think that Bermuda will turn itself around very fast.
Yes.
Very fast.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
we create the drag, but we also can create the opportunity.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, John. Well, that's all from back in the day. Thank you very much, Sir John, for
Pleasure.
having me. See you next month with another Back in the Day with John Swan when he visits Premier Mrs. Thatcher in February 1984. Thank you very much.